Audiobook Walkabout, James Vance Marshall. Chapter 1. It was silent and dark, and the children were afraid. They huddled together, their backs to an outcrop of rock. Far below, in the bed of the gully, a little stream flowed inland, soon to peter out in the vastness of Australian desert. Above them, the walls of the gully climbed smoothly to a moonless sky. The little boy nestled more closely against his sister. He was trembling. She felt for his hand and held it very tightly. "All right, Peter," she whispered. "I'm here." She felt the tension ebb slowly out of him. The trembling died gradually away. When a boy is only 8, a big sister of 13 can be wonderfully comforting. "Mary," he whispered, "I'm hungry. Let's have something to eat." The girl sighed. She felt in the pocket of her frock and pulled out a paper-covered stick of barley sugar. It was the last one. She broke it, gave him half, and slipped the other half back in her pocket. "Don't bite," she whispered. "Suck." Why they were whispering they didn't know. Perhaps because everything was so very silent, like a church. Or was it because they were afraid of being heard? For a while, the only sounds were the distant rippling of water over stone, of the sucking of lips round a diminishing stick of barley sugar. Then the boy started to fidget, moving restlessly from one foot to another. Again, the girl reached for his hand. "Aren't you comfy, Pete?" "No." "What is it?" "My leg's bleeding again. I can feel the wet." She bent down. The handkerchief that she had tied around his thigh was now draped like a recalcitrant garter over his ankle. She refastened it, and they huddled together, holding hands, looking into the powdery blackness of the Australian night. They could see nothing, they could hear nothing, apart from the lilt of the rivulet, for it was too early for the stirring of bush life. Later there'd be other sounds, the hoot of a mopoke, the mating howl of the dingo, and the leathery flip-flap-flip of the wings of the flying foxes. But now, an hour after sunset, the bush was silent, frightening still, full, to the children, of terrors of all the greater for being unknown. It was a far cry from here to their comfortable home in Charleston, South Carolina. The hours meandered like slow, unhurrying snails. At last the boy's head dropped to his sister's lap. He snuggled closer. His breathing became slower, deeper. He slept. But the girl didn't sleep. That would never have done, for she had to keep guard. She was the elder. The responsibility was hers. That was the way it had always been, as far back as she could remember. Always she had been the big sister who had stuck plaster on Peter's knees, had taught him to tie his shoelaces, and had taken the lead in their games of Indians and cowboys. Now that they were lost somewhere in the middle of an unknown continent, the weight of her responsibility was greater than ever. A wave of tenderness welled up inside her. Always she had big sistered him, but now she must mother him as well. For a while she sat staring into darkness, the darkness that was warm, thick, and almost tangible. Soon her mind became utterly blank. The day's events had been too overwhelming, had drawn on her too heavily. The rhythmic beat of the small boy's slumber came to her lonely now. Gradually her breathing fell in step with this. The whisper of the creep came to her like a croon of a lullaby. Her eyelids drooped and closed, fluttered and closed again. Soon she too was fast asleep. In the darkness beyond the gully, the bush came slowly to life. A lumbering wombat came creeping out of his ground den, his short, stumpy body forced away through the underscrub, his long, food-foraging snout plowing through the sandy earth in search of his favorite roots. Suddenly he stopped, sniffed, his nostrils dilated. He followed the strange new scent. He came to the gully. Soon he came to the gully. He looked the children over, thoughtfully, not hungrily, for he was vegetarian, an eater of roots. His curiosity satisfied, he shambled slowly away. Random fireflies zigzagged by, their night lights flickering little sparklets from a roving toy-sized forge. Soon, creeping along the edge of darkness, came another creature, a marsupial tiger cat. Her eyes widened by the night to glowing oral flames in the fire. She too had scented the children. She too clambered young and tender and tempting. But they were too large, too bulky, she decided, to drag back to her mewling litter. On velvet paws she slunk away. A night mist tried to gather, failed, for the air in the gully was too warm, and dissipated into pre-dawn dew. The dampness settled on the children, pressing down their clothes, tracing the outline of their bodies in tiny globules of pearl. They stirred, but didn't wake. They were lost in their dreams. In her sleep, the girl moved uneasily. She was in the airplane again, and she knew that something was wrong. She and Peter were the only passengers, sandwiched between the crates of vegetables and the frozen carcasses of beef, and she was watching the port engine, waiting for the flames she knew would come. Too soon they were there, the tiny tongues of red licking of the cowling. In her sleep she twisted and moaned, then mercifully her mind went blank, nature's safety valve that protects, even in dreams, those who have been shocked by it beyond endurance. And the next thing she dreamt was that she and Peter were staggering away from a blazing plane, she pulling him frantically because one of his legs was numb and his feet kept sinking into soft, yielding sand. "Quick, Peter," she gasped, "quick, before it explodes." She heard a dull, pulsating roar, and looking back, saw the figure of a navigating officer carrying the pilot and clambering out of the wreckage. In the heat of the explosion, he glowed white-hot, disintegrating. Again, her mind went numb, but in her sleep she clutched her brother's hand, clutched it and squeezed it so tight that he half woke and slid awkwardly off her lap. The night lights of the fireflies became pale and anemic. Out of the east crept a permeating grayness, a pearly opaqueness of the sky, the sun up of another day.